Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Quarantine Talk. Went out for a drive again today, and it's been a while since we did one of these videos. And in the time since we did, I've accumulated a whole new bunch of questions and comments and stuff. So I figured we could do another one of those Q&A videos, because it went pretty okay last time. So without further ado, let me get into the questions. So I got one from Amar, who asks, what Linux distro do you use? I use Ubuntu. It's Ubuntu 19.10 with the Mate desktop, and I use that because it is kind of a boring, uninteresting distro that doesn't bother me to mess with it, and I can focus on the things I actually want to do instead of messing endlessly with making my computer work in the first place. And I like Mate because it continues the GNOME 2 look and feel timeline, which was a good timeline, I thought. Okay. And then Sleeky3K says, it's cool to see how stuff in Serenity just fits together so easily. It's really coming together nicely. I agree, Sleeky. I'm really happy with the way things are coming together, because for the longest time in early development, I was working on Serenity thinking that, oh yeah, one day it's all going to come together. All of this is going to come together someday. And I was living on this kind of balloon of hope that it would come together. And I think the best example of things coming together lately has been the live markdown preview feature that I did in the text editor, because it was just so damn simple to put it together. Everything just fit into place, and all of this stuff that we've been working on for the last year and a half, just kind of, I don't know, clicking together, like the GUI library with the text editor, and the Markdown library that Sergey did, and the web engine that renders the HTML that libmarkdown produces, and like just fitting it all together, and it's so nice and sleek, and I don't know, it was just so awesome to see it click, and it really made me feel like it was more than the sum of its parts, which is a feeling that I think we're going to see more of in Serenity. And it's really great when I feel like it kind of validates the sort of the monorepo style of development a bit, because the kind of features that we're starting to be able to do in Serenity are very difficult to do if you are spread out across many different projects. And the fact that we can do everything together and move together and kind of and like be as one in the system, it's very interesting to me. So I agree, Sleeky. It's very cool. And then Antonio asks, have you done a to-do list? That link bug would be perfect candidate to add it to the to-do bug list, or you can just use GitHub issues. So I have like my personal to-do list, which are text files that I keep, and I don't think I've ever shown them in videos, but I do have them on my computer. And I'm not a big fan of to-do apps or like these productivity apps or stuff like that. I never was. I know a lot of people like productivity hacking or whatever, but for me, just having a text file where I can sprinkle notes occasionally so I don't forget, it's usually enough. And curiously, actually, I find that when I'm making videos and I'm like speaking out loud all the time, it somehow commits things to memory in a way that's similar to taking notes for me. Like if I say something out loud, I actually remember it much better than if I don't. So I don't know, but I kind of lately I'm trying to get better about filing GitHub issues, because I got into this like early on in Serenity, like the first 6 months or so when it was like really only me. I had this huge list of bugs and ideas and features and stuff I wanted to do, and then I'm still struggling a little bit to get out of that mentality and write more GitHub issues. But I'm working on getting better at that because when I write GitHub issues, then more people see them, and like very often nowadays, like people actually pick them up and go and work on them, and that's really awesome. It's so weird when I see like these bugs that I wrote like a year ago or something. Somebody like picks it up and fixes it. Um, it's a very strange but very warm feeling. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, then we have a question from the Krills saying, "How long do you think it will take before you can develop Serenity inside Serenity?" That's a good question, the Krills. And it's something I get asked every now and then. And honestly, I don't know. I don't think it would take very long if we switched gears and tried to just focus on becoming self-hosting. The thing is that I... Oh, wait, let me see if I can get the light back on. Nope, I can't. Okay. um, I guess I just don't feel like it's really urgent for me. I'm not in a hurry to go into Serenity. It's more important to me to build it right and build it beautiful and get it to the place where I want it to be, rather than to rush myself into that environment. And I don't have some like particular feature set in mind. It's more of a kind of feeling that I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for this feeling that the system is rigid and robust, but still fast and snappy. And I guess there's a lot of it is associated with the look of it, because at least for me, like lately, I did a whole bunch of pixel pushing, pixel alignments type work in the user interface, which I haven't been doing for a while, and then just sitting down and fixing up toolbars to look better and fixing icons and stuff like that. That's the sort of thing that pushes me closer to switching over, because I'm looking for I don't know, that warm, cozy feeling um, of switching to Serenity, feeling like the right thing to do. I don't know, but yeah, if we do switch gears, or if somebody else decides that they want to pick this up as a goal to work on, it wouldn't take particularly long for that to happen. I think we have. I mean, we already have GCC and binutils and everything. So I know that there are some issues if you try to build Serenity inside Serenity. And right now we're looking at a pretty big build system overhaul, which is going to regress that a little bit, because we'll need to make the new build system work inside Serenity as well. But I don't think it would be too much work. Just some libc bugs to track down. I know binutils, the linker has some trouble linking the kernel, for example. Like some offsets come out wrong for some reason, and stuff like that needs to be tracked down. But I don't know. I think it would take a couple of weeks if we tried to do that. But we'll get there when we get there. I'm not in a hurry. Okay, and then we have a question from someone named Subscriber, who asks, "Is Serenity POSIX compatible?" And that's a good question. Is anybody POSIX compatible? I don't know. We try to do things in a POSIX-ish way in Serenity, but it's always been my thinking that POSIX is kind of a recommendation rather than some dogma that we need to follow to the T. And we already have various extensions and things that we do differently from POSIX, and I don't see that really changing. But in general, I think it's pretty good to at least if we use the APIs from POSIX, that we make them behave like POSIX says that they do most of the time. just because that makes it so much easier if you wanted to build some third-party software on Serenity. Like the fact that we can build GCC and binutils is because of our POSIX compatibility, right? So there is value in that. I think it gives us access to tools that we otherwise would have to make ourselves, like compilers and stuff. But we are definitely not 100% compatible, and we never will be. But we are POSIX-ish, POSIX-like, maybe Unix-like. Anyways. And then, let's see. Then we got a question from Bobby, who asks, with the open command, are there plans to add a config program to say which programs are used to open which files? Like default apps on Windows or MIME type editor on Linux? Yes, there is a pull request in development currently from somebody who's adding a dedicated server that sort of launches an appropriate application based on the file that you pass it. And that launch server will have a configuration file that you can then edit to decide which app opens which types. And the PR is, I think it's currently changes requested because it had some little configuration file issue that I asked to fix, and then I don't know what happened with that, but that's sort of where we're going with that right now, at least. Just to delegate that work to a helper program that can launch the right program for you. The Serenity desktop system likes to use helper programs, sort of these on-demand servers that spawn when you request their service, and then they can carry out something for you. And it's something that we want to do transparently, but it's a very nice way to reduce the set of things that any given app can do. Like if you wanted to launch an app, you can't just fork an exec necessarily, but you can ask the launch server to open a file for you, and then he will do that in a controlled way. So yeah, we're definitely going to make that configurable. Okay, and then we have a question from 10E999 who asks, any plan to do an overview of the OS? It could be an annual video. An overview of the OS. So the only real overview, I guess, of the OS that I've done was the very first monthly video back in March 2019. Since it was the first update video, I showed off the whole system as it was back then. And then the closest thing to that was the 1-year anniversary website post that I posted on serenityos.org, the Happy Birthday Serenity page. And I guess it would be kind of nice to make an overview of the system at some point to show like where we're at. But it's something I think about from time to time, but I just never sit down and actually engage with it because, I don't know, I always think like, oh yeah, but that would be nice, but first I just want to have this thing first in the system, and then I can make an overview. So that's sort of why it doesn't happen, because I always imagine that I'm going to do it, let me just add this one thing first. But I don't know, maybe it would be a good thing to do sometimes. Maybe that could be a type of video, maybe, I don't know. Or maybe I could ask someone else to do it. If somebody else wants to show off the system and make an overview, that would be very interesting too. Because I know I have a very sort of specific idea of the system, and it would certainly be very interesting to see how someone else would sort of present it. But I think I'll probably do an overview video. That's a good idea. I just don't know when or how, but I love the idea. I should do that. All right. Okay, and then Mike says, I'm excited for the day I can install this as my primary OS. I've only been tracking this project for a short time, but it's amazing how quick it's evolving. Kudos to everyone involved, but especially Andreas for your talent and dedication to sharing your progress. I couldn't write any C++ code to save my life, but I'm totally transfixed by your videos. It's like I'm living as a programmer vicariously through you. Thanks for that. Sure, Mike. Like, thank you. I don't know. I always have a hard time knowing how to react to this type of stuff, but I'm really happy that that you like even if you say that you can't write C++ to save your life, right? But I really do think that it's not as bad as you think it is. Like for anyone who feels like they can't write C++ to save their life, it's not as hard as you imagine it is. And I I do kind of think that just exposure to someone like me just sitting and working in C++, it should probably take some of that that feeling away of like this being so difficult, right? Um, at least I try to make it look non-difficult. And it's, I mean, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, so it's not like you're gonna pick it up now and be as productive as I am. But people have a very twisted idea, I think, of how hard it is to get good at C++. It's it's not terribly hard. It just requires time and effort, and if you're willing to put those in, I bet you that you can write C++ to save your life someday. But thank you for the nice comment, Mike. I appreciate it. Okay, and then Accelerator says, you know someone is actually looking your content when someone pushed the dislike button. This is a nice video update about Serenity. Looking forward. Yeah, so this is I guess this was from the last update video that I made for the April update. And sometimes people dislike the videos, and it is funny to me that somebody does that. And I mentioned it last time too. It's just I don't know. I wonder. I so wonder who does that, because I don't know that I dislike things on YouTube, and I don't really understand the psychology of disliking, um, but I do appreciate the feedback. So because at least I assume that somebody who dislikes, at least they watched some part of the thing and then like didn't like it, and then they're telling you that, right? Not just that they just dislike it and then leave right away. Like presumably they saw something they didn't like. So it is information. Anyway, then Akarin, or Akarin, I don't know how to say that, says, I want to sponsor, but it's apparently impossible to do with a debit card for some reason. Anyways, great work as always. So I don't really have any control over the sponsor things. Like I use Patreon and GitHub sponsors and PayPal, and if something doesn't work there, I don't really know what to do. But I really appreciate that you want to sponsor, and if you manage to do that someday, then I'm very happy to have you. But I'm really happy to have you regardless. So it's all good. Anyway, then Sabamac X says, TrueType fonts next. I don't know what that was in reference to, but I can tell you that Ali right now has been working on prototyping some TrueType support, and I'm pretty happy about that, because that means that he has to write a bunch of path rendering code, which we need in Serenity anyway. So now we're getting like these curves and path filling algorithms and stuff in place, which will be very helpful for things like the HTML canvas, and also it's just a nice thing to have in your toolkit. Like you need path drawing in your painting toolkit or in your graphics toolkit. Okay, and then Eddie says, shouldn't the included applications such as text editor have proper, less generic names? Microsoft's built-in text editor, for example, is called Notepad. The built-in text editor in Amiga Workbench was called ED, which, while not very good, it still sounds less generic than literally calling it text editor. So the extremely generic and obvious names in Serenity, that's just how we do things in Serenity. That's the style that we have. And I chose this style coming from a background at Apple, where internally the names for many things are structured in the exact same way, and then when things get released, they actually get names. So for example, the Safari web browser internally at Apple is called web browser. And I kind of had that same style of thinking when I started naming things in Serenity, and then it just stuck here. But I do like the generic or the obvious, straightforward names a lot, and I feel like they're like a flavor of their own. But it did originate from a mindset of sort of placeholder names, and then maybe one day giving these things names. But I don't know. We'll see. Right now, I like the names that we have, but maybe we'll name something someday. Okay, and then QCabe says, so you're reinventing Windows 95. That's a funny question. No, I'm not reinventing Windows 95. Serenity is, under the hood, not very much like Windows 95 at all, but above the hood, very much so, because I really, really love the straightforward graphical style of 90s Windows systems, but I don't necessarily love the way that they were structured internally. I'm a much, much bigger fan of Unix, but Unix, on the other hand, was a very, very poor visual experience in that same time. So I figured, why don't we take the awesome things from the two camps, mush them together, and then I was reading about the Circle C++ compiler this morning, and I think it was Sean Baxter who makes the compiler. He said somewhere that Circle is sort of like you went back in time and added reflection and introspection to C++ like 15 years ago, and then you went forward in time and you see what happened to C++ as it has evolved since then. Maybe it was Sean who said that, or maybe I read this in a Hacker News comment. I don't remember. But whoever said that, I thought that was kind of interesting. And I feel like Serenity is very similar to that idea, that we sort of imagine going back in time to the 90s and fusing together Windows and Unix, and then letting them evolve, and then seeing where we would be today if those things had gotten together back then. And I mean, that's a very broad idea, but I sort of like that way of thinking. Or as I've said in some other video, that I think of Serenity much like synthwave music, where you are sort of taking these modern tools to recreate a retro aesthetic, but it is very much modern inside. It just has that look and feel from the past. Anyway, I can talk endlessly about this subject, and it just gets really, meandering. So let's move on to the next question. So Dan says, I like how Andreas is struggling to contain his disbelief at how fast Serenity is progressing. Yeah, dude. Uh, I am struggling to contain my disbelief. Uh, the sheer volume of contributions in April was intense. We had over 40 people and 1,000 commits in that month, and so much awesome stuff. And I am still waiting for the day when I start to feel stressed out about the whole thing, because I don't feel stressed out about it. I'm just having so much fun. But I think the fact that this has been gradual has made it possible for me to deal with this. I think if this came on overnight, it would be very, very hard to deal with. But I I really appreciate that the pace of Serenity sort of growing has allowed me time to adjust um, to the increasing pressure, I guess. And because of having time to adjust, I'm able to deal with the pressure. So that's really nice. But since we started doing the browser and the JavaScript engine more hardcore, uh, the pressure has definitely increased. But it's really fun, and I get to work with really curious people on really fun stuff. So I have absolutely nothing to complain about here. So I really appreciate everybody who's been contributing to the project and working on it together with me lately. It's been really great. And I hope it's been fun for you as well, everybody. Okay, so then I have a question from Salvador Dali, who says, Hey Andreas, it's been a long time since you've done a quarantine or commute talk. Indeed. If you're planning to do one soon, here's a question. Do you believe Serenity OS defines you more and reflects who you are as a programmer, or the works you did in Silicon Valley were more important overall in your life? Man, that's a good question. Um, I I used to feel like the work I did in Silicon Valley, like especially on the Safari browser, I used to feel like that mattered more than anything else I ever worked on. Um, but I don't feel that way anymore. Now I definitely feel like Serenity is my life's work, and we're still at the start of it, so that's pretty great. Um, and I don't know if it's, I mean, maybe it's too soon to call it my life's work, but to put it this way, if I died tomorrow, I would be most proud of the work I've done on Serenity. That's for sure. And I guess that's really what the question is getting at. And Serenity is definitely much more reflective of who I am as a programmer, because before I started working on Serenity, I had a lot of issues with sort of inferiority complex and the classical imposter syndrome. And I struggled with working at Apple and being surrounded by these really, really clever people. And these really clever people who were my friends and my coworkers, but like really clever. And it always made me feel like, oh, I don't know if I'm smart enough to hang out with these guys, or I felt bad for so long that I didn't have a university degree. I was a high school dropout, and I didn't know half of the data structures and algorithms that people were name dropping, and they were not even name dropping them; they were just having conversations about them. But like I didn't know what these things were that people were talking about. It made me feel bad, it made me feel inferior, and since I started working on Serenity, I've just gotten away from thinking that way about myself and like not caring about it at all, and instead just motoring forward, building things anyway. And in the process of doing that, I've just realized that I shouldn't have worried about this in the first place, and I was just being insecure because I don't know, I had been living in a very ineffective way, I think, in the past, that um, I didn't venture outside of my comfort zone too much because I was kind of convinced that I would fail outside my comfort zone. So I stayed inside of it, and I was sort of playing it safe, um, and you know, when you play it safe, then you don't win the big bucks. But now with Serenity, I'm out of my shell, and I'm learning so much from doing this, and just putting myself out here like I do. Like I do my programming very publicly. I invite people to hang out while I do it, and I think not only does that help me get better at programming because I've forced myself into a situation where I have to learn stuff, right? Like, and I have to engage with things earnestly. Not only do I do that, but um, I also hear all the time from people who say that by seeing me do these things, that makes them realize that they could do these things too. And that is just an absolutely fantastic outcome, I think. I'm so happy if I can give someone a shortcut to realizing that you can do these things. Because it took me so long to realize that I could do these things if I just tried, instead of just staying in my comfort zone and playing PlayStation all night instead of trying to learn some new thing. So I am really, really glad with the way things are going with Serenity, and the way things have been developing for me personally as a programmer, as a person, and I am really excited about the future of this project, and I'm really excited about the prospect of being able to do this full time someday. Like things are just moving in that direction a little bit, little by little, all the time. We're taking these small steps um, towards being able to support development from donations and from ad revenue. I was going to say, but this YouTube channel does not get a lot of ad revenue, and I think probably a large part of that is because a lot of programmers use adblock, and I don't mind. Like I use adblock too. I don't care about that, um, but it's not just the donations. Like it's also the ad revenue. I think it's something like $50-$60 in a month from ads. So it's not the biggest thing, but it's something. Definitely not. Definitely not having a problem with that. Anyway, I don't know why I mentioned that. But I'm really glad with the way things are going, and I'm really glad that that what I do resonates with so many people. It has given me something to live for, and I'm really grateful for that. Whew. It is good to have something meaningful to live for. Yeah, I think that's a good question to end it on. And it was nice to sit in the car and do a new talk. And I like this questions and answers format. I'm gonna go. I'm not gonna give up on the talk style videos, but it's nice now that there are so many questions and comments since last time. It's nice to try to answer them, because it's been a little bit. It's been a little bit hard to get back to everybody who's been writing to me lately, and I feel bad about it sometimes. But then I remember that there's no expectation that I'm going to get back to everybody, right? It's just it's that part is basically harder than than dealing with all the code coming in, because it feels so strange to not reply to everybody all the time, but I have to be a little bit, I guess, a little bit careful with my time, because otherwise it just runs away. But I don't mean to be rude. If I didn't get back to you, it's just because I'm just trying to be a little bit careful with my time. And I hope I could reply to some people in this video instead. And we can certainly do more of these in the future. And I really appreciate that everyone's hanging out with me here. I don't know where this project is going to go, but just the pace that we're going is fascinating. And I hope it's going to go somewhere really nice. It feels like it will. Anyways, I hope things are going okay for everybody out there. This whole lockdown quarantine thing just keeps going and going and going, and you hear from around the world that people are starting to react in some pretty strange ways to it. And here in Sweden, they're taking a pretty lenient approach to locking down in general. Like, the government is very careful with locking things down, trying to avoid it. But my company and many companies, or my employer, I should say, in many places, they've made everyone work from home anyway, even though they're not required to. So we're sort of on a soft lockdown here. But I hope everybody's doing all right out there, and I hope you're programming something that is really fun to work on, something that keeps you curious and keeps you learning, because that's what you got to do. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me in the car tonight, and I guess I'll see you next time. Bye.